Hello, and welcome to the TerraLex Insights podcast, where our goal is to present multicultural perspectives by leading professionals. These perspectives on contemporary issues will help lawyers and business people work better together. I'm your host, Terry Pepper Gavlik, TerraLex's Chief Business Officer. And today, we're very happy to welcome our special guest, Terry Mottershead, who's the Executive Director of the Center for Legal Innovation at the College of Law, and she covers Australia, New Zealand, and the Asia-Pacific region, and coming to us tonight in my time zone and tomorrow morning in her time zone from Australia. So welcome, Terry. We're so happy to have you.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks so much for having me. Maybe this show should be the two Terrys.
The two Terrys. There you go. I think we have a whole new podcast. I love it. And we even spell our names the same. So we're going to delve in a little bit about innovation and whether we think the legal industry can rise to the challenge, as we were just talking about who this quote should be attributed to, but I believe it's Winston Churchill who said something about you should never waste a good crisis. And sad as the world events are, there are opportunities presenting themselves in the legal industry. So Terry's going to talk to us a little bit about that. But I think to kick it off, maybe tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself, what the Center for Legal Innovation is and your role, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. And as I say, thanks again very much for having me. My role at the Centre is really leading what is effectively a think tank. That's what the Centre does. And we look at what's happening in the regions that we cover, so Australia, New Zealand and Asia Pacific. And we take those trends and we transform them into bite-sized pieces or translate them into something that law firms can use on a day-to-day basis. And we think in that respect, we hope that we're supporting the profession to really make that transition to a different type and a more contemporary type of legal practice. We disseminate the information, we get folks to share experience, we connect people with different people and in different ways to help them on that journey. And we do it with really the enormous support and generosity of people who give their time and energy and intellectual property and capital to making all of that happen.
So maybe give us an example just so it kind of comes to light if you have one readily available.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess one that's on the top of everyone's list is the whole thing around legal tech and AI. And we know that that's impacting our industry enormously, but we often don't have the opportunity to see the new technology in action or what it's doing or even why it came into existence. So we launched last year a thing called our Legal Techie Tuesday. And what we do with that is that we ask the folks at various levels on their journey, so startups all the way through to more established legal tech companies, to literally do a webinar and talk about what the technology does. But before that, what was the problem they were trying to solve? And then actually do a demo. So in that respect, we're kind of translating that trend, let's all focus on tech, into something really practical. Here's something you might be able to use. And we capture that because we know, like the folks in your network, not everybody can be there at the same time on the same day. So it's the opportunity to go back and look at it, share it with colleagues, or actually be able to see it for the first time.
That's great. So given the current conditions, you and I had talked a little bit previously about the opportunities that might exist for law firms and wondering whether or not we think, that the legal industry will be able to step up to the plate and seize the day, or is that going to pass them by? Are you seeing encouraging signs of law firms taking advantage of the opportunities, and in what ways?
I am, but I think that I would say still it's pockets, and you kind of it might be one step forward and two steps back. So I think for us, and we have spoken about this, but I think that right now, kind of amidst all the tragedy, and looking for something positive in that, there really is the opportunity for the legal profession to change what it's been doing uh, for a very long time. But it's going to require us at, I guess, that really broad or high level of really going through a bit of a mindset shift, frankly, thinking about how we work quite differently, thinking about what we do quite differently, thinking about putting the needs of our clients first in everything that we do, every process that we put together, every system that we put together, and really focusing on the convenience aspect of that as well. But I think also that's kind of the client-centered or I guess the externally centered part. But there's a huge internal part here that I think is important for us to take the opportunity to think about as well around issues of diversity and inclusion and mental health and well-being. And that, you know, one of the expressions I've seen recently, Terry, that I really liked, and I think it came from Adam Smith Esquire actually, is the opportunity to build back better. And it really struck me, you know, the opportunity to build back better, better for clients, better for our people. But it's an opportunity that sits at the moment that we could embrace or we could lose. And I've seen great changes that are taking place. We certainly won't reset to zero, but I also saw an announcement here in Australia just a couple of days ago where, for example, all the courts are reverting back where they can, where people are able to come back to work, reverting back to doing things exactly the same way as they used to do.
Oh, that's disappointing.
That's why I say it's, you know, it's a step forward, maybe too bad.
I wonder how much, because it's not, innovation doesn't come inexpensively, and I wonder how much advantage firms will take of different opportunities when they've had to cut basic things like, you know, staff salaries and partner compensation and other travel expenditures and things like that because of the fear of whether or not they're going to get paid. Are you seeing firms that want to do things but just aren't willing to fund it?
Yeah, look, I think there's always a fear that innovation is expensive, but it can also be extremely cheap. You know, it can be as simple as asking the folks that are working with you how they think that they could do something, you know, better, faster, and cheaper. And I think when we do that, we're often surprised by how many good ideas are actually sitting within our own organisations without going outside. So I think there is a concern about spending money at the moment, but you know, with any innovation, and anyone that's advising anyone about innovation, the first place they're going to go is not going to be spend money and buy things. It's going to be look at what you've got and use them better. And I think the classic that we've seen in that is particularly around tech and the sort of tech that we've had to use because folks are working from home. I mean, just actually looking at the products that you've already got and what they can do and using all their functionality hasn't cost you a cent more.
Yeah.
It's just basically using what you've got better. And that's got to be the starting point. I think it's been expressed as love the tech you're with, which is a great kind of, you know, reference to an old song. But I think that's, you know, that's what you should do. Look at what you've got first, audit it, use all the functionality in that, and then see where the gaps are. So it could be expensive, but also could not cost you a cent.
Yeah, it's a good point. We've actually, even within the TerraLex network, have looked at our existing technologies, and we've even had some of our team members do a deep dive into things that we just took for granted that we're using every day to say, are we using all the functionalities that we can? And I think that's probably something organizations can do. I love the whole build back better notion. And I know we talked previously about a kinder, gentler workplace, coming back to that. I'm starting to see that fray a little bit around the edges too. I don't know how it is in Australia, but certainly here in the US, there's a lot of divisiveness about whether or not students will be going back to school and the impact on people, lawyers and staff and work in law firms. There was a discussion on a listserv I was on today that had that very topic. Do you think that are we in a timeout and we're just going to come back to the same behavior we exhibited before we got put in timeout? Or do you think that this is actually, you know, just that pause that will cause us to think differently about how we work, and not necessarily technology, but just the whole culture of law firms?
I think it's a choice. And I think it's a choice that particularly the leadership of the industry will need to consider and to make. So, of course, we can just go back, we can reset and go back to what we were. And I just wonder, because it's easier to go back to bad habits often than it is to embrace and entrench new and better ones. I hope that we don't. I think there will be that familiarity, no matter whether it's good or bad, that we'll want to go back to. But I don't think it's in our best interests. I think that we've had, as you've called it, the time out to sit and reflect and to think about what's worked for our clients and what's worked for us. If we don't as an industry, I think, really think quite deeply about that and see where we are now as a foundation to a new beginning, I think we would just continue to lose work to those folks that have thought about it and are stepping up and stepping in to take that work away. I mean, as we look at all the work that lawyers, used to do, and we're only talking 5 or 10 years ago, and look at the work that they now do, there's a huge amount of work that is no longer done by lawyers and will never be done by them again. And so I think as an industry, there's a survival aspect of innovation in all of this, even if we can't come at it with any other, set of glasses on, rose-tinted or otherwise. I think that it's really important for us to think about that. If we don't step up, others will, and they should. I mean, if we're not doing the best that we can, then others should step up and step in. And I think clients will respond. And in that respect, I'd have to say to you also, Terry, we're no different than any other industry that we can think of. We've just been somewhat shielded from having to adapt and change. Mm-hmm. But what's happened in all of this is that all industries everywhere have thought about it, and the solutions that they're also looking for don't know boundaries. So people are going to be able to jump in and do a whole bunch of stuff that they haven't done before if we don't step up.
Yeah, I mean, it's even something as simple as it was, and it will always remain something astounding to me that all the years, I always worked remotely as a consultant and on and off in my current role, and I always knew you could work equally well if you had to, but always, every law firm I worked in, that just was something that was not done. It's going to be astounding to me for the rest of my life how quickly the entire world, and I'm looking at law firms particularly right now, went home and worked the minute they had to. And it was pretty darn seamless for most. I mean, there was a little issue here or there, but that was a huge change that was either, you had to do it, you didn't have a choice, and it was foisted upon people, and people rose to the challenge. And I know that's a simple example, but there's so many things like that I think people could step up to. And in fact, and I'll help you brainstorm this because I'm about to put you on the spot, but if some firms, and I think a lot of times this may be some of the larger firms or entrepreneurial firms, do have a bent towards innovation, and they're always looking for ways to innovate their practices and their people and the way they deliver their services. And that some firms even have this sort of chief innovation officer role, but that's not the majority. So for a law firm or a business or a company listening now, where do they start? Are there podcasts? I know maybe you could talk a little bit about your podcast. That might be a starting point. Are there things they could read? Should they be talking to others? What are some suggestions in that vein?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, what I would say to you is, and all folks that are listening here, is maybe think of a word substitution, because I know that innovation has become, in some camps scary and in others cliched. And so I would say just think about the words continuous improvement and agility. And every single business needs to be thinking about continuously improving what they do, how they add value, whether it's helpful for their clients, and every other industry does. So I think about it as continuous improvement. Think about it as agility. If we just look at our marketplace now and how quickly that is changing, just phenomenally, you've got to be an agile and adaptable business to continue to survive. So with that hat on, I guess, with that mindset on, the starting point for me is always, first and foremost, looking at your client or your customer needs, understanding their journey, understanding their pain points, And basically your innovation starts there. It starts by looking at what your clients need and want, overcoming those pain points. And I would think that one of the big things that's different about innovation now is that in developing the solution, there's a lot more around collaborating with clients throughout the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also a lot more around, getting that out there and kind of almost workshopping it with your clients as an experiment as you go along. So not having to be perfect. I think the days of developing any solution without consulting the people that it's actually going to be delivered to are well and truly gone. And in many respects, the process that I've just explained to you, and the end loop of that, which is obviously making the changes that are needed till you get to something that really works, that's the legal design thinking framework in many respects. So I think you've got to start with what your clients need. You've got to work with them to develop the solution, and you've got to be willing. That's the agility part. You've got to be willing to make those changes all the time. And here's probably the tough part: forever, because it is that continuous improvement loop. But in doing that, what you're also building is a new and different and more integral relationship with your clients, because they're part of solving that solution. They're part of working with you on that, and they stay with you on that. And so I think it's also building a different type of relationship, a stronger, more sustained relationship, which ultimately probably becomes a much more satisfying way of working for everybody involved.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting when you say that, because I've seen and heard a lot of, particularly law firms, but even in-house lawyers about their clients and their businesses, complain that right now with everything going on, it's really hard to get a discussion or a conversation with the client, so to speak. And so I've seen some firms, maybe, I don't know if you have any examples of this, but what I've seen that's impressed me is the firms that have sort of got some intuition around their client's journey. And so rather than making the client start with, a blank sheet of paper with them and taking all of that time, which clients sometimes may not have, they're coming to the client with some ideas and saying, I see that you've been doing these licensing agreements in 50 countries around the world, piece by piece. Here's a technology solution we would be happy to build for you to manage that for you. Or, that's, I don't know if that's a real life example or I just made that up, but not making the client be part of that sort of design thinking right from the start is maybe one way in a time like this. Is that something you've seen?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've pointed to a couple of other things that are different about the way that we approach these sort of things now. And one of them is around data and the use of data. So you've got a lot of it. Every firm has loads of it. Every organisation, everyone has loads of it. But it's actually looking at that and looking at what it's telling you. And it will be telling you things about your clients, particularly your larger clients or lots of clients for whom you do the same sort of business.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be telling you things. It'll be telling you things when problems start to go wrong, things start to go wrong, or problems start to arise, or it'll be telling you things where, for example, it may not be necessary for someone to consult you. It may be a part of the process that could be automated. So I think it is looking at what your data is, looking at what it's telling you. I think what you're saying is absolutely correct. Your clients are not there to tell you what your business opportunities are. You are there to determine them and to go to them, exactly as you've said, look, we've got this, see what we can do. And I think, we're seeing, it is still with the larger law firms, but we've certainly seen some of the larger law firms basically do exactly that. In fact, set up legal tech hubs where they've developed those solutions for clients, and ultimately,
our members in Australia actually
exactly.
We'll give a little plug to Lander and Rogers, yeah.
Absolutely, and we've been delighted at the centre to actually work with them on that Legal Techie Tuesday series that I was speaking with you about earlier, but really to to develop that for the benefit of them doing their work better and therefore for their clients or with their clients. And in some cases, we're seeing those hubs or those firms now also being able to take those and say, hey, is there an additional revenue stream here? Have we developed a solution that could actually be commercialized? And could we sell that as a legal product now? So I think there's again, it's just that mindset shift of thinking about how do we solve that problem? What are the tools that we've got to solve it? How do we approach it, which is what we're talking about, but also where could that take us ultimately in terms of our business model and our business offerings?
Very, very true. So we're coming sort of to the end of the time here, but I wanted to make sure I covered everything that you wanted to discuss in the subject of innovation and what law firms and even anyone in the legal industry right now should be thinking about. I personally have concerns that everyone's just sort of digging their way out of a hole and so focused on the immediate problems that we might lose this opportunity. Any advice or other suggestions you want to pass on?
Yeah, look, I think that this is a process, and I think at the moment we've had to innovate in a crisis, and I think that we're kind of in the middle now, where we've got the opportunity to look at that and see what's worked and what hasn't, but not see that as the end. Mm-hmm. So what else have we learnt about that? What else has it told us about how we're running our firm, about ourselves, about how we're interacting with our clients, and how do we build on that? I think if folks want to take this innovation journey forward, they have to commit to it. There has to be a group of people leading it, but it has to become every single person's responsibility. So you have to create the avenue for all those folks we were talking about at the beginning, who you may have never associated with having the great ideas in your organisation and giving them the opportunity to bring those forward. But then a commitment, I think, to sustained excellence in a way. And that will come with adapting and changing, but also building your organisation into one that will continue to be able to adapt and change. So I think that innovation, as I said earlier, is one of those words that is maybe getting a bad rap or almost really cliched now. So substitute it for any other word that you want to. But I think the big thing for our industry is to understand we really won't reset to zero. And it's an opportunity to be seized or lost. But the rest of the world is not going to stand still, even if we make the decision to. So, of course, I've got you'd want me to be kind of passionate and encouraging about innovation, right? And I am, because I think for the industry, it's really the only way forward, and it's an incredibly exciting journey.
So just before we wrap up, could you tell us a little bit about your podcast on Legalpreneurs? And we'll make sure we put a link to it in the description in this podcast. I think it might be something our listeners would be interested in checking out.
Yeah, sure. And thank you so much for the opportunity. It's called the Legalpreneurs Sandbox podcast series. And basically it's really interviews with thought leaders explaining and telling their stories about how they have been on and what they've done on the innovation journey, but also folks that are supporting the industry in taking that journey as well. So, come along and have a listen. We'd love to have you there.
Great. Well, thank you very much. As mentioned at the front end, we've been talking to Terry Modershead, who is the Executive Director of the Center for Legal Innovation at the College of Law. Thank you, Terry. Really, really interesting. Lots of food for thought. Have a great day.
Thanks so much for having me, Terry. Thank you.